LiberalViewer presents.
So welcome to the December 4th edition of LiberalViewer Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 15 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, and Fox News. Did I get all five of those? The so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can see the five subtopics of basically the Trump election is still the main topic, and I have five subtopics that I'm covering. Basically, the five subtopics are Trump's tweets, the whole Taiwan controversy, and something about his lack of intelligence briefings I'll fit in there as well. The mandate myth and this big controversy about the Harvard seminar where the campaign managers from the 2016 campaigns got in a big fight about the meaning of the whole election and why they won. And then there'll be one short clip on the carrier jobs deal in Indiana and whether that's crony capitalism. And then two clips at the end of Jill Stein talking about the recount and what she hopes to get out of it and what her real motivations are. And that's from a Fox News Sunday interview. But as usual, I like to start off with some political comedy. And Saturday Night Live was back this week with Alec Baldwin doing his impersonation of Donald Trump and basically mocking him for his strange inability to control his tweeting and especially retweeting very obscure people. Like there was this 16-year-old high school student who was attacking Jeff Zeleny on CNN, and that was mocked by Saturday Night Live, and it kind of shows the way that you can't really parody what Donald Trump's doing, because they're like in the middle of it, there's like turning to the camera and saying, he really did this, as I will discuss with you after we watch that 55-second clip together over here.
And Mrs. Lehman, I think someone retweeted me.
Seth, you're just some random kid in high school. Who would retweet you?
Kellyanne, I just retweeted the best tweet. I mean, wow, what a great, smart tweet.
Mr. Trump, we're in a security briefing.
I know, but this could not wait. It was from a young man named Seth. He's 16, he's in high school, and I really did retweet him. Seriously, this is real.
He really did do this.
Well, sir, you're the president-elect, so I guess you can do whatever you want, but we'd really like to fill you in on Syria.
God, Seth seems so cool. His Twitter bio says he wants to make America great again.
That is cool, sir.
It also says he loves the Anaheim Ducks.
So that was basically the beginning of the cold open on Saturday Night Live last night. You can watch the entire cold open for free on YouTube on the Saturday Night Live channel on YouTube at a link I put down in the video description. I've actually put a link to the whole Saturday Night Live YouTube channel as well as, or to the whole Saturday Night Live episode as well as that cold open, which I thought was pretty funny. And the funniest part of it, though, is they were Alec Baldwin in his Donald Trump impression was making fun of Donald Trump's inability to stop himself from tweeting. And of course, as you might expect, Donald Trump tweeted his criticism of just tried to watch Saturday Night Live, just tried watching Saturday Night Live, unwatchable, totally biased, not funny. The Baldwin impersonation just can't get any worse, sad. Well, I think for my Trump impersonation, you can see that the Trump impersonation could be worse, but it's just ridiculous that Donald Trump is having all this problem with tweeting and with not really sticking to any sort of coherent foreign policy, and I'll get into the foreign policy part when I get to Taiwan, but this next clip I want to show you is actually NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd giving kind of an overview of Donald Trump's unconventional or perhaps incoherent foreign policy, and also the way it's kind of like a presidency divorced from the facts. And I'll discuss all that with you after we watch that 3-minute clip together over here.
Dubbed the post-truth election, are we getting a look at a post-truth presidency?
Trump's first campaign manager argued at a campaign post-mortem this week
that his words don't matter.
This is the problem with the media. You guys took everything Donald Trump said so literally. And the problem with that is the American people didn't.
And though Trump promised in April to keep carrier jobs in the U.S.,
We're not going to let carrier leave.
he actually said this week, while announcing that half those carrier jobs will stay, that he did not expect to be taken literally.
I said, carrier will never leave. But that was a euphemism. I was talking about carrier like all other companies from here on in.
The idea that Trump is not fully accountable for his words became a campaign trope.
The voters take Donald Trump seriously as a candidate, but they don't take him literally. The press takes Donald Trump literally, but they don't take him seriously.
But as Trump shifts from campaigning to governing, his words will have legal, diplomatic, political, and national security implications, as past presidents have quickly discovered.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
You like your health care plan, you keep your health care plan.
On Friday, Trump himself learned that words matter after he broke with decades of diplomatic precedent and took the first call from Taiwan by a U.S. president-elect since 1979, angering the Chinese. Indians are befuddled, some are livid, after Trump, according to a Pakistani government readout, called Pakistan's prime minister a terrific guy and promised to visit the country. So when can U.S. allies, enemies, members of Congress, and voters take Trump at his word? NBC counted 141 distinct shifts on 23 major policy issues during Trump's 511-day White House run. During the campaign, Trump said he was going to repeal Obamacare. Now he's promising to keep the most popular elements of the law intact. During the campaign, Trump pledged to dump the Paris Climate Agreement.
We will cancel this deal so that our companies can compete.
Now he says he will keep an open mind. During the campaign, Trump promised to end pay-to-play politics in Washington.
Drain the swamp.
Now, former Governor Sarah Palin is calling the carrier deal crony capitalism. Ultimately, Donald Trump's success may depend on how literally his supporters take his promises.
Politicians are always saying they want to drain the swamp and get rid of lobbyists and cast their briefcases into the Potomac. The lobbyists aren't going anywhere, but they do expect him to put the lobbyists in their place.
And joining me now is the Vice
So I thought that was a fairly good NBC report on this whole idea of Donald Trump's hyperbole, and they even gave the original commentator source for that whole thing about how the media elite take Donald Trump literally, but they don't take him seriously, while Donald Trump supporters take him seriously, but they don't take what he says literally. But, I mean, the whole idea that what the president says shouldn't be taken literally, like, it's almost like the whole bully persona. That's kind of what bullies do. They after they get called on their bullying, they say, oh, I was just joking around. I was just kidding around. I was just razzing you. I didn't really mean anything, but, I don't know. It's if someone doesn't have the discipline to not stick to what is true and what they say, I think that's kind of disqualifying as president. But I thought a lot of things Donald Trump said along the way should have disqualified him as president. And speaking of that, I want to get to specifically some of his tweeting behavior that has been so ridiculous. I showed the Saturday Night Live mocking of him retweeting the 16-year-old, and that actually came up in this Harvard forum. The clip I'm going to show is actually Jake Tapper at that Harvard forum hosting Kellyanne Conway and Robbie Mook, the two campaign managers for Trump and Hillary Clinton. And this is an audience member asking Kellyanne Conway about whether Donald Trump will stop tweeting, and especially things that aren't true, like, Jake Tapper then in his follow-up brings up the whole retweeting the 16-year-old, and Kellyanne Conway tries to say that it's not unpresidential if Donald Trump does it because he's going to be the president, and Jake Tapper calls her on it, and even the audience laughs at Kellyanne Conway's twisting on that one, as I will discuss after we watch that clip together here.
What's a question for Kellyanne? My question has to do with President-elect Trump's communication strategy, specifically if he's going to continue using his Twitter account. I know it breeds a lot of authenticity, but he's also been known to tweet out falsehoods and other liabilities. So is that something that he plans to do after inaugurated?
So that's going to be up to him, the Secret Service, and others who have to help decide those issues. I will tell you that the President-elect looks at his social media accounts, a combined 25 million or probably more at this point, users on Twitter and Facebook as a very good platform through which to convey his messages. I can tell you firsthand that there are posts that he makes that otherwise would not be heard or seen by those 25 million people but for him posting them. But you know, he's a unique person who's been following his instincts and his judgment from the beginning.
I think one of the points that I think we'd all be interested in hearing is, in the last week, he tweeted that there were millions of fraudulent votes. There's no evidence that there were millions of fraudulent votes. I don't doubt that there were some fraudulent votes, there always are, but the idea that the only reason Hillary Clinton won the popular vote is because of millions of fraudulent votes is not true. And then when CNN reported on that, he started retweeting people criticizing Jeff Zeleny, our reporter, including a 16-year-old boy. And I think the question arises in a room full of people who want President-elect Trump to succeed, who want him to realize a vision where there are more jobs coming into this country, where you do achieve so much of what you want to achieve. Is that really presidential behavior?
Well, he's the president-elect, so that's presidential behavior, yes.
So the
and
things that Bill Clinton did in the Oval Office that you criticized, those were presidential?
Are you actually comparing what Bill Clinton did in the Oval Office?
You're saying if the president does it, it's presidential.
Shall we review for those who weren't born then what President Clinton did in the Oval Office?
I'm saying just because a president does something doesn't make it presidential.
Yes, I wasn't saying otherwise. But the fact is, this man is now president of the United States. And he's tackling very big issues, the ones that he campaigned on and the ones that he will execute through his first 100-day plan. I know him very well. I'm a trusted advisor. He is committed to making good on the promises and on frankly the plans, and he's going to be focused on that. We need to move on and support the president and the initiatives that he's going to make. I don't like a lot of things that people in leadership do, but they're there. And that should be respected. I mean, I was raised to respect the office of the president and its current occupant, no matter who he or she is.
Jake, I just hope moving forward from this campaign, you know, Kellyanne is right. The campaign's over. It's time to move on. I just hope the truth doesn't get lost or sacrificed.
Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Well, I don't know. As things seem to be going, the truth does seem to be they say truth is the first casualty of war. Well, it's sort of the first casualty of the Trump presidency or even the Trump campaign, or it's like truth has been on a long-term losing battle with the right wing especially and the forces of Fox News that I've been chronicling over the years, and the Trump presidency just sort of catapulted that over, was like a huge increase in the number of conspiracy theories and false theories, and this whole idea of the illegal votes. Well, that's been primed by Fox News in order to justify these voter ID laws that Republicans have been passing all over the country, even though there's no actual evidence of in-person voter ID fraud or in-person voter fraud that requires an ID to combat. They've been passing all these laws that shut out Democratic voters, or big D Democratic voters for the Democratic Party, and they've been telling all these lies about this non-existent voter fraud. And so, of course, when Donald Trump starts trying to float these rumors, float these ideas, like the tweet I showed last week about how there were millions of illegal votes, well, you saw Kellyanne Conway not really answer that question. The next two clips I'm going to show are Mike Pence and then Reince Priebus also trying to wriggle out of this Donald Trump falsehood and trying to cite non-existent evidence, and it's all pretty pathetic, starting with Mike Pence over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos trying to wriggle out of this Donald Trump false statement about illegal votes in California and elsewhere in this clip.
On Twitter, including this week, at the beginning of this week, that tweet which I want to show right now about the popular vote. And he said, in addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. That claim is groundless. There's no evidence to back it up. Is it responsible for a president-elect to make false statements like that?
Well, look, I think 4 years ago, the Pew Research Center found that there were millions of inaccurate voter registrations around.
Yeah, but the author
in
of
the
the study has said it is not any evidence about what happened in this election or any evidence of voter fraud.
Look, I think what is historic here is that our president-elect won 30 of 50 states. He won more counties than any candidate on our side since Ronald Reagan. And the fact that some partisans who are frustrated with the outcome of the election and disappointed with the outcome of the election are pointing to the popular vote, I can assure you, if this had been about the popular vote, Donald Trump and I have been campaigning a whole lot more in Illinois and California and New York.
And no one is questioning your victory. Certainly, I'm not questioning your victory. I'm asking just about that tweet, which I'm going to say that he said he would have won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. That statement is false. Why is it responsible to make it?
Well, I think the president-elect just wants to call to attention the fact that that there has been evidence over many years of
That's not what he
fraud.
said.
And expressing that reality, the Pew Research Center found evidence of that 4 years ago.
It's
Is certainly his right. But you know,
it's his right to make false statements.
Well, it's his right to express his opinion as a president-elect of the United States. I think one of the things that's refreshing about our president-elect, it's one of the reasons why I think he made such an incredible connection with people all across this country, is because he tells you what's on his mind.
But why is it refreshing to make false statements?
Well, look, I don't know that is a false statement, George, and neither do you. The simple fact is that
I know there's no evidence
there is evidence, historic evidence from the Pew Research Center of voter fraud that's taken place. We're in the process of investigating irregularities in the state of Indiana that were leading up to this election. That's the fact that voter fraud exists is a fact in this country.
Can you provide any evidence to back up that statement?
Well, look, I think he's expressed his opinion on that. He's entitled to express his opinion on that, and I think the American people, I think the American people find it very refreshing that they have a president who will tell them what's on his mind, and I think the connection that he made in the course
whether
of this
it's true or
campaign is
not
reflective of that. Well, they're going to tell him he's going to say what he believes to be true, and I know that he's always going to speak in that way as president.
General Petraeus is coming up, as you've said.
My favorite part of that is George Stephanopoulos' follow-up question. It's refreshing for him to make false statements, which is basically what it's refreshing and unconventional, and you know, sticking to the truth is just so establishment and elite and old school. Or it's not what the people don't want the truth. They want truthiness. It reminds me of the beginning of the Colbert Report, actually, and I was talking about truth being the first casualty of war and the first casualty of the Trump presidency or campaign. I also was reading your live comments along the way. I saw this one from S. Wolf. That the truth is the first casualty of partisan politics, which I think is something you can also take from that last clip. And then Reince Priebus here, he even is like more willing to justify the whole illegal votes thing over on CBS's Face the Nation, talking to John Dickerson. He goes so far as to say there is evidence that there was voter fraud, which seems pretty ridiculous to me without there being any actual evidence. And I will talk about that with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Chief of Staff, what do you do when he says something like millions of voters voted illegally in California when you know that that's not true?
Well, I don't know if that's not true, John. I mean, I saw there was an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day, and it had a certain percentage of people that are voting that shouldn't be voting. There are estimates all over the map on that. And here's the problem: no one really knows. I mean,
but you think
don't know
millions
that
of
that's
people?
Not true.
You think millions of people voted illegal? There is no evidence that it happened in millions of votes in California. I guess the question is, when you're president, can you just offer a theory that has no evidence behind it, or does he have to tighten up his standards of proof?
I think he's done a great job. I think the president-elect is someone who has pushed the envelope and caused people to think in this country, is not taking conventional thought on every single issue, and has caused people to look at things that maybe they've taken for granted. You look at the flag burning issue last week. I mean, this is an 80% issue. And then you watch the news media and they say, well, it's constitutional. Well, right, it is constitutional, but it doesn't mean it's not a subject for debate and discussion for the Supreme Court to revisit down the road. So I think that unconventional thought is something that has caused a revolution in this country, and which is why I think President Trump is going to go down in history as a really great president.
In the brief time we have left, the president...
A really great president. Yeah, that's what is a characteristic of our really great presidents, is sticking to the conspiracy theories and the false statements despite being confronted with evidence of their falsity or their, lack of, any sort of evidence to back them up. But, that's the way conspiracy theories work, of course, is that the lack of evidence is just evidence of the cover-up. But whatever, I don't know where all this whole illegal vote conspiracy, I think it was on like InfoWars and Alex Jones, and that may be the whole source. That's why Reince Priebus there and before him Mike Pence were not really able to give, the Pew Research thing. It was about like the inaccurate voter registration, meaning that when people die, they don't take them off the voter registration rolls for some period of time. But that doesn't mean that those dead people actually voted or that there was voter fraud. It just means that the voter rolls are inaccurate and they leave people on the rolls who shouldn't be on the rolls. But that doesn't mean that they are actually voting. Anyway, I want to move from the whole tweeting thing over to the Taiwan really bad foreign policy blunder, or it depends on how you look at it. And to make the transition, I'm going to start with this Saturday Night Live clip, Weekend Update. First, a few jokes they made about Donald Trump tweeting on Weekend Update to sort of complement the Alec Baldwin joke or impression at the beginning. And then I'm going to end with this Michael Che joke about the whole Taiwan thing, which makes a good point about how it seems ridiculous that the media is finally realizing from this Taiwan incident something important about Donald Trump that I will discuss with you after we watch that minute and 20-second clip over here.
Of course Trump is on a thank you tour. That's his element. He loves having a big audience. That's why he's constantly on Twitter. You think he likes having dinner with Mitt Romney? By the way, why does Mitt Romney look like an Instagram model being forced to take a picture with the man who just bought him a new butt?
This week, Donald Trump tweeted about flag burning and voter fraud, which some think was just to distract the media from more important issues. But if they're worried that his tweets are getting too much attention, they should just report them in the most boring way possible, the way they report a weather forecast. Watch.
This morning, Trump's tweeting about voter fraud with scattered retweets in the afternoon. Then at 3 a.m., a 90% chance of a tweet storm about Rosie. This has been Tweets on the Ones.
See? No one cares anymore.
You're not going to believe this, but the media is beginning to question if Donald Trump knows what he's doing. Trump had communication with the president of Taiwan, which violates a long-standing agreement between the U.S. and China. But in fairness, the president of Taiwan called him. And also, there's no way Donald Trump knows the difference between Taiwan and China. He probably just thinks one makes his hats and the other makes his ties.
So that was actually pretty ridiculous, the whole taking of the call from the president of Taiwan, and that was the topic of a couple different responses. First, I'm going to show Mike Pence trying to justify that, where he was saying, "Oh, it's just a courtesy call. It's not a change in policy," even though it changes a policy that goes back to like 1978. And even in Mike Pence's answer, he kind of makes a mistake where he, instead of just referring to the elected leader of Taiwan as he did on another show where I think it was the This Week with George Stephanopoulos interview, that I didn't take his Taiwan clip from that one. I took it from NBC's Meet the Press, where he refers to the president of Taiwan, which is also kind of a diplomatic faux pas, apparently, and I will discuss his defense of Donald Trump and whether it's like genius or blunder genius, or I don't know, genius. Is there some combination of genius and blunder? You can let me know down in the comment section as we watch Mike Pence's defense of what Donald Trump did over here.
Some foreign policy and the issue with Taiwan. Does the president-elect intend to break with one China policy?
Well, I think the conversation that happened this week with the president of Taiwan was a courtesy call. She reached out to the president-elect, and he took the call from the democratically elected leader of Taiwan. And it's one of more than 50 telephone calls that the president-elect has taken from and made to world leaders in the midst of a historic pace in cabinet appointments and senior appointments, building a legislative agenda, even traveling the country and saving 1,000 jobs in the state of Indiana. And so it's all a reflection of the tremendous energy, and I think it's the kind of approach that you're going to see him bring to challenges at home and abroad.
So this was an intentional sort of challenge to the foreign policy establishment a little bit, to the U.S.-Chinese diplomatic establishment?
No, this was, Chuck, this was a courtesy call. The democratically elected president of Taiwan called to congratulate the president-elect, and as a gracious man,
nothing should be read into, nothing new should be read into it.
Well, I don't think so. I think that I honestly think that what world leaders are finding, those that have reached out to the president-elect, those I've talked to several dozen world leaders. I spoke to King Abdullah just yesterday, and I think there is a great sense of enthusiasm and optimism around the world because they're encountering in President-elect Donald Trump a strong leader.
Chinese government's very upset about this.
With broad shoulders, who's going to advance America's interest, but he's also going to be engaging the world on behalf of America.
I understand the Chinese government's very upset about this. Do they have a right to be, or do you tell them, hey, back down? Don't. You're over worrying. Is that what you would? What's your advice to your counterparts in China?
I think I would just say to our counterparts in China that this was a moment of courtesy. The president-elect talked to President Xi 2 weeks ago in the same manner. That was not a discussion about policy, and we're going to be preparing after January 20th to advance now what will be President-elect President Trump's agenda on the world stage, and we'll deal with policy at that time.
Have you or the team?
So you can let me know what you think down in the comment section about that defense of Donald Trump's faux pas of taking the phone call from the elected president of Taiwan, or even Mike Pence's faux pas there of referring to the president of Taiwan as the president of Taiwan, which apparently you're not supposed to do, and whether the whole thing is some genius calculation on the part of Donald Trump, or if he just like took the phone call because he didn't know any better. And I'm going to show Kellyanne Conway in the next clip trying to defend the whole thing, and she seems to think, she never really says that he did it on purpose to change the policy, but she just kept saying he's fully briefed, which leads Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday to ask some follow-ups about some of his other mistakes that he seems to make in foreign policy and ask about his briefing. And I think Chris Wallace does a pretty good job of doing a follow-up. And then this is my favorite Kellyanne Conway obfuscation of the entire program, maybe my favorite clip of all from the entire program. Watch for a clip somewhere, watch for a part of this next clip near the end where she says the phrase, "not always skipping." He's not always skipping. I won't give away exactly what it's about, but that's kind of my favorite obfuscatory way to obfuscate that Kellyanne Conway has come up with in all of these answers, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together here.
Trump demonstrated, for any doubters still out there, just how unconventional a president, holding a campaign-style rally where he continued to bash the media, and holding conversations with foreign leaders that break with decades of U.S. diplomacy. Joining me now from Trump Transition Headquarters in New York, Kellyanne Conway, one of Mr. Trump's top advisors. And Kellyanne, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Let's start with the controversy over the call that Mr. Trump took this week from Taiwan's president, President Tsai, the first time leaders of our two countries have, to the best of our knowledge, spoken since the U.S. broke off relations in 1979. Now, you say that Mr. Trump was fully briefed, knew what he was doing before this call, which raises the question, does he intend to change our one China policy, which recognizes only Beijing?
Well, President-elect Trump is well aware of our one China policy. He accepted a congratulatory call from the president of Taiwan. That marks probably the 48th or 50th world leader that has reached out to the president-elect or the vice president-elect Mike Pence since they won the election last month, Chris. They've talked to the prime ministers or presidents of Israel, of Singapore, of Japan, of China.
But this one's different. So the question, I guess, is, does this signal a change in policy, or was it just a phone call?
It was just a phone call at this point. It signals the fact that he accepted a congratulatory call. I know that China has a perspective on it. I know the White House and State Department probably have a perspective on it, and certainly Taiwan has a perspective on it. But the president-elect's perspective is that he accepted a congratulatory call, and when he's sworn in as president and commander-in-chief in a little over a month, Chris, he will make clear what the fullness of his plans are. But people shouldn't read too much into it. And some of the press coverage, not here necessarily, but elsewhere, is really astonishing when you think about how it was covered when Barack Obama was going to try to reach out to Iran and come up with an Iran nuclear deal. And this man the president-elect received a phone call from a world leader in another country. We know about one China. He knows about one China. He's routinely briefed on these matters, and that's just what it is.
So let me ask you about this, and I think one of the reasons such a big deal was made of it is because of the fact that the president-elect has had a number of controversial phone calls with foreign leaders. He reportedly told Pakistani Prime Minister Sharif he would, quote, play any role you want me to play to address and find solutions to the country's problems, despite Pakistan's relationship with terrorists. He also spoke with Philippine President Duterte, who's been accused of ordering the murder of thousands of suspected drug dealers, which raises the question, Kellyanne, why is Mr. Trump refusing the State Department's offer to brief him before these calls, and why is he skipping the daily briefings, intelligence briefings, that President Obama gets every day?
He is not always skipping those briefings, and he's briefed by any number of credible sources on these issues. And I think people, Chris, frankly, are cherry picking about these world leaders and then they're accusing the president-elect of somehow countenancing some of these behaviors in these other places. But look, that's really unfair when you think about, we just had an election, and the opponent, Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State, was using the State Department to get money from foreign governments like Saudi Arabia, which doesn't even respect girls and women. So I think people just have their hair on fire, particularly those who believe we're still entrenched in the permanent campaign, are trying to reverse the election results from last week. Let's give this man time to form his cabinet, and he's also showing respect to the current president, President Obama, who still is the president for about 6.5 more weeks, and the commander-in-chief certainly. He's not out there, but President-elect Trump is not out there making policy or announcing new policy prescriptions worldwide. He's merely taking phone calls, and he will, I'm sure, re-engage with many of these leaders once he takes the oath of office.
Kellyanne, speaking of...
So there you had it in the last minute of that clip, Kellyanne Conway's obfuscation. That was my favorite obfuscation of the broadcast, the response to whether Donald Trump is taking all the daily intel briefings. That's the briefing, the most secret sources from around the world that tell the president what all the threats are and what the big national security issues are for the day, and that he gets it every day and then understands how things evolve. Well, is Donald Trump getting those briefings every day, or is he skipping them? No, according the best that Kellyanne Conway can spin it is he's not always skipping the briefings, and that's kind of sad. And Reince Priebus doesn't do quite as good a job, and this is just like a 45-second clip where he's answering the same question over in his interview on CBS's Face the Nation, and he said, gosh, it seems like we have to have those briefings every day, like it's some sort of like chore, or like it's so tedious that whenever you do it, it seems like it's every day, even if you're doing it once a week, which I'm not even sure, based on Kellyanne Conway's answer and Reince Priebus's answer coming up, that Donald Trump is even taking the daily briefings every week, but you can let me know what you think after you watch that clip here.
He likes to take in a lot of information. He has not taken in as many intelligence briefings as previous president-elects. Why is that?
Well, but he is, and you know they have daily briefings now. And
is he getting them every day?
Flynn and KT McFarland. It's about every day. It's happening quite frequently, John, and I think those are just going to ramp up as we get closer to January 20th. But he's certainly informed. He's getting briefed, and it feels like every day. I'm not sure if it is every day, but it's a lot, and it's who he is. It's someone who studies and someone that wants to be informed, and it's someone who asks a lot of questions and listens.
Is he a details guy?
He is.
And Reince Priebus claims he is a details guy, but didn't really give us any, didn't pin down how often Donald Trump is getting those daily briefings. And how often are you supposed to get daily briefings? Well, just, what are they called? They're called daily briefings. And if you're going to be the president, that's one of the important things that the president is supposed to do, every day, to set his national security agenda. I mean, assuming that Donald Trump is even going to be that involved as president. I guess it's Mike Pence is getting the briefings more often, and his Mike Flynn, the national security advisor, is getting them, and KT McFarland, who I've seen a lot of times as a Fox News commentator. She's like the deputy national security advisor, and that doesn't really give me much confidence, although I guess I wouldn't be that much more confident if Donald Trump were getting his daily national security briefings. In some ways, it might make him more likely to give out classified information or make some other big mistake, I guess. So in that way, is it just a blessing for another 5 or 6 weeks that he's not really paying that much attention? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, but like I said, that's the last clip I want to show on the whole Taiwan and foreign policy and competence of Donald Trump on foreign policy, which is seeming worrisome so far based on these issues. I want to move on to 3 clips I have that I basically called the mandate myth, but it's actually about this whole argument that took place at the Harvard seminar where the different campaign staffs are supposed to give the first draft or second draft of history, and a bunch of the media elites were there as well. And Jake Tapper did an interview. I showed a clip earlier where he had Kellyanne Conway and Robbie Mook on, and there were other media elites who did interviews. Well, Kellyanne Conway and Joel Berenson did the 2 sides of the issue on NBC's Meet the Press, and I'll show their 2 sides in a minute. But of course, over on Fox News Sunday, even though Chris Wallace was fairly confrontational with Kellyanne Conway, or I'm sorry, with which one was it? Was it Kellyanne Conway? No, it was Mike Pence. That's right. Oh no, he was with Kellyanne Conway. He was pretty confrontational, talking about the Taiwan and the intelligence briefings, and got her to say that he's not always skipping the intelligence briefings. Well, in this next clip with Kellyanne Conway, I think he is just basically lets her give her side, and it's kind of sad compared to the 2 NBC Meet the Press clips I'm going to show after this clip, where Chuck Todd has on someone from the Clinton campaign and someone from the Trump campaign. Of course, over on Fox News Sunday, they just had someone from the Trump campaign to give the Trump side of that whole argument at the Harvard debate. And even in the intro where they quote what happened at the Harvard seminar, they cut out the part where the Clinton campaign staffer was talking about how Steve Bannon gave a platform to white supremacists on his Breitbart News. You know, the whole alt-right news site, Breitbart, was meant to be sort of a platform for white supremacists and the nationalist alt-right movement, and that's cut out of the quote that Chris Wallace confronts Kellyanne Conway with. It's almost like a softball question more than a confrontational question, and the follow-up doesn't really give the other side very clearly, I don't think, but and you can compare it to what happens on Meet the Press that I'll show afterwards, but here's the Fox News version over here.
Harvard's Institute of Politics holds a forum every 4 years where representatives of the winning and losing campaigns get together and try to have a kind of academic review of what happened and why one side won, one side lost. Well, it wasn't that way this year. It got pretty ugly, and here are some of the exchanges between you and Clinton Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri. Here they are.
Do you think I ran a campaign where white supremacists had a platform? You going to look me in the face and tell me that?
It did. Kellyanne
Really?
did. If providing a platform for white supremacists makes me a brilliant tactician,
That's
I
just
am
crap.
glad to have lost. I would rather lose than win the way you guys did.
No, you wouldn't.
Yes.
No, you wouldn't.
Yes. Yes.
That's very clear today. No, you wouldn't, respectfully.
What did you take away from that?
Well, the rest of the exchange was me telling her and her team as politely as I could that you missed America. All you needed to do was recognize that a lot of voters had a very hard time accepting Hillary Clinton as this outsider disruptor who was ethically clean and would treat all Americans fairly, had run an aspirational, uplifting campaign that had an economic message for a lot of working America. The idea that you know what, they can say what they want about me and my team. We've got very broad shoulders over here, as you can imagine. But to besmirch over 60 million hardworking men and women in this country who became part of the Trump movement, to pretend that Donald Trump was not out there every single day, Chris, sometimes 4, 5, 7 stops in a single day, bringing his case directly to the American people and saying what to them? That we're going to reform the Veterans Administration, which leaves veterans to die, that we're going to stand behind law enforcement and the thin blue line, that he's going to create 25 million jobs over 10 years, unleash energy investment, have an infrastructure program, repeal and replace Obamacare, which has really reduced the quality and the choice and the access and increase the price of health care for many Americans, left others behind, that he's going to defeat radical Islamic terrorism in the face of Hillary Clinton referring to them as our determined enemies and President Obama saying that they're the JV team that's been brushed back. Nobody believes that. Yep. And so to besmirch those voters is really beyond the pale to me. Now, I had already, that was a 2.5-hour forum, and you're playing a couple clips, so I had already credited them as brilliant strategists, as people I respect as professionals. That was all done. But there was no grace, there was no congratulations from them, and frankly, there's no self-awareness that they lost the election because they missed America. They blame Bernie Sanders, they blame Jim Comey. It's typical of Hillary Clinton. In Hillary Clinton's world, it's always somebody else's fault.
All right, one last thing. I'm glad to see that this was such an academic.
And I actually agree a little bit with what Kellyanne Conway said at the end there about how the Clinton campaign hasn't done a real good self-assessment of why they lost, and I'll talk about that a little more when I show the clip after next, which is this guy, Joel Berenson from the Clinton campaign, who doesn't really admit that Hillary Clinton was just a bad candidate. But before I get to that, I have to just criticize Chris Wallace in that last clip as being very non-confrontational with Kellyanne Conway, both in terms of his questioning, where he didn't really do anything to confront her on any of the assertions she was making there, but having her on and not having anyone on from the other side to counterbalance, and that is different from what they did on State of the Union, where they had on Robbie Mook and Kellyanne Conway, and it's different from what they did on NBC's Meet the Press, where they had Kellyanne Conway on, and then, like I said, this guy Joel Berenson, who was a senior advisor to the Clinton campaign. And first I want to show how Chuck Todd over on NBC's Meet the Press was much better at being confrontational in his questioning of Kellyanne Conway. She starts off here talking about what a big mandate they had, and it's, there's not much to it, I don't think, if you, they're trying to create the mandate myth, which is the topic heading I put on this, which is why this clip is in here. But you'll see Chuck Todd points out that, they're really being sore winners. And what I like most about this clip, you'll see at the very end where Kellyanne Conway says that she's very gracious and very humble. And I don't know if you're saying about yourself that you're very gracious and very humble, that at least you can be very humble. But you can tell me what you think after you watch that clip with me over here.
We're going to talk about the popular vote. I think answers your questions about sore losers. The idea that Donald Trump doesn't have a mandate after he got 100 more electoral votes than Mitt Romney did. He got 306 electoral votes. It wasn't close. He won states that had not gone Republican in decades. And by the way, had this been a race for the popular vote, we would have won that too, because Mr. Trump would have campaigned in California, in New York, stayed in Florida, gone to Illinois perhaps, these population-rich states. We did what you're supposed to do to become president. A, go and campaign in those states that were the so-called swing state battleground states. B, actually have an economic message that appealed to workers across the country, actually talk about patriotism, defeating radical Islamic terrorism, repealing, replacing Obamacare. People open up their mailboxes, fire up their computers, they see these premium increases. But, you know, the idea that he doesn't have a mandate when on President Obama's watch, they've now lost the White House 60 seats in the House, over a dozen Senate seats, over a dozen governorships, and over 1,000 state legislative seats. This Democratic Party is having an identity crisis and a circular firing squad. And what I heard at Harvard is the same thing I hear all the time. It's Jim Comey's fault. It's Bernie Sanders' fault.
Okay,
it's anybody but Hillary Clinton's fault.
Let me ask you this, though. A lot of people look at what you've said and what others have said, including the president-elect at his rally in Cincinnati, and say, boy, Team Trump, they can't seem to accept winning, that they haven't been gracious in victory. What do you say to that?
Chuck, you know what? I'm gonna hit back on that. I'm an incredibly gracious, humble person, and let me tell you something. Every single media outlet, including this one, on good days ignored us, on regular days mocked us. And that included when I told you and your colleagues there's an undercover, undercounted Trump vote. No, there's not. Maybe it's undercounted for Hillary, people said. These rally sizes matter because it portends the enthusiasm and momentum that is owned by Donald Trump. We're the ones with the message. We're the ones turning these counties around that President Obama carried twice with over 50% of the vote. We switched 200 counties, and we did that with messages that mattered to people. He's the guy who talked about veterans, talked about defeating terrorism. I mean, you know, we were mocked and ignored. Go back and look at the headlines 2 weeks out everywhere, and the talk on networks like this. We were completely dismissed. Secretary Clinton wasn't even mentioning Donald Trump's name most of the time.
Joel, let me turn to you.
So that was Kellyanne Conway on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, and I thought he did a better job of being more confrontational. And like I said before I showed the clip, I think it's ridiculous to say, I mean, maybe Kellyanne Conway is an incredibly gracious and incredibly humble person, but can you really be incredibly humble if you're pointing to yourself and saying, I'm incredibly humble, I'm incredible? No, that is kind of a contradiction in terms. You can disagree if you think down in the comment section, but that seems pretty obviously true. And before I leave this topic, I want to show what they did on NBC's Meet the Press that they didn't do on Fox News Sunday, which is showing someone from the other side, someone from the Clinton camp. They did this, like I said, and I showed already on CNN State of the Union with that clip that I just showed, the Kellyanne Conway clip, but you saw at the very end of it there was a little bit of Robbie Mook. Well, this is Joel Berenson, who I always get confused with Saul Berenson, who is like one of the characters on the Showtime series Homeland with, what's her name, Angela from My So-Called Life. Why is it that Angela from My So-Called Life became a spy, and so did Felicity from Felicity? Or, I don't know, maybe I'm showing my age by like the teen shows I used to watch. And yeah, Felicity and My So-Called Life, the stars are now spies. And so that's why I get Joel Berenson confused with Saul Berenson from Homeland. And here's Joel Berenson, I think, not really answering questions very well from Chuck Todd, especially about the Hillary Clinton campaign's excuses. That he answers the question about excuses just by giving more excuses and not really accepting the fact that Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate who didn't run a very good campaign, as it turns out, as we can tell, at least in 2020 hindsight, as I will discuss after we watch that clip together over here.
And it seems as if we gather together all the different reasons that you and others have given to Hillary Clinton's defeat. James Comey, third-party candidates, sexism, young voters, the media, Obamacare premiums, Bernie Sanders, health rumors. What wasn't on there was the point that Kellyanne just brought up, Hillary Clinton. Does she accept any responsibility for this defeat on her own?
Look, I think the reality here is that this was a strong campaign. Kellyanne Conway said they had a better message on the economy. When you look at voters who said they were voting for someone who cares about people like me, Hillary Clinton won those voters. When you look at voters who said the economy was their #1 issue, Hillary Clinton won those voters. Look, I think the issue now going forward is, and I think Kellyanne Conway, again today, Kellyanne talked about his economic message. I think he's raised the bar very high. I mean, this is a guy who, during the course of the campaign, by the way, Kellyanne said built his businesses on the back of the little guy. And now voters are going to hear him as president call for giving the biggest tax cuts in history to corporations and very wealthy Americans.
You're not answering my question. Do you guys accept any? Do you guys accept this?
Yeah, we did answer your question. We did in the panel. We did in the panel, by the way. I also said in that panel, when we were asked what we have to do differently during the course of that day, the Democratic Party can't just keep winning the popular vote in presidential elections. We've won them 5 out of 7 times. We have to rebuild at the state levels. They did a very good job in some of their states that they had to win. They did a good job, obviously, in Michigan and Wisconsin by eking out narrow wins in those states where they hadn't won previously.
Joel, let me ask you this: if the election were, I'll get you one more shot here, I promise. But Joel, if the election were the first Tuesday in January and you had another 6 weeks here, what's one thing you would do differently in the last 4 weeks of the campaign?
Just probably do more.
What does that mean?
I would do more states. I'd hit more states more frequently. I'd probably ask for another debate, probably ask for a faith forum to hear Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both talk about their roots in faith and the strength of hers, which I think are dominant. I think we'd also probably keep talking about those tax cuts I just mentioned that we're going to hold him to during the course of his presidency. The biggest tax cuts, twice as big as the Bush tax cuts. I don't think that's what working people think they're going to get from Donald Trump, or that's going to help them, but that'll be the high bar he's got to clear.
Kellyanne, I want
to. So I don't know. What do you think? In the comment section, let me know. I think that that answer from Joel Berenson, more excuses, not really accepting responsibility, or Hillary Clinton's responsibility and her campaign's responsibility for the loss. I mean, it was a very close election. I don't buy the whole mandate myth, and I think Chuck Todd did a good job with Kellyanne Conway pointing that out, but I think he did a good job with Joel Berenson there as well, and so that's the last clip on the mandate topic. The next clip I want to show is, I guess it's the only one on the whole carrier jobs thing, that I almost made a clip about the way that Donald Trump claimed to save the jobs at this Ford plant in Kentucky earlier, a couple weeks ago, and that came up again in the last few days where he claimed to save these jobs. He didn't save all the jobs, even though he previously promised to save all the jobs, and that's a point. This is also another Chuck Todd Meet the Press clip. I thought, for some reason Chuck Todd gets like some of the biggest criticisms amongst my live viewers, and even the recorded show viewers seem to really dislike Chuck Todd for some reason. And I'm willing to criticize him. I don't think he's like the greatest anchor ever. I mean, he's certainly there's certainly reasons to criticize him, but I think he often does a good job. And I think in this next clip with Mike Pence, he does a good job, and he's talking about the way the carrier deal is kind of crony capitalism, and it doesn't really fulfill Donald Trump's full promise. And the thing I like most about this clip is where Chuck Todd, you remember last week when he was talking to Kellyanne Conway, she started attacking the media, and he says, that's really a crutch for you guys, and I'm not going to let you get away with it, or I'm going to call you on it. And he does the same thing with Mike Pence. It's like some line he's decided he's going to draw where he's not going to let the Trump campaign attack the media to distract from whatever question they're not answering, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Why isn't this pay-to-play politics? You gave a tax break. Some people could say you gave a tax break to Carrier so that they would only send 700 jobs overseas. Sarah Palin called it crony capitalism. Why isn't it?
Look, we were heartbroken back in February when Carrier announced that they were pulling up stakes and taking all of their jobs south of the border to Mexico, closing factories in a couple locations in Indiana. I asked them at that time whether or not the state of Indiana could offer any incentives that are very routine in the competition for jobs in the country, and they said, don't bother. We won't even want to look at incentives. Make no mistake about it, the only reason Carrier is staying in the United States is because Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, and the leadership at United Technologies and Carrier.
This isn't government intervening in the private sector?
What happened here?
Why is this not government intervening in the private sector?
Well, first off, let's remember now more than 1,000 Hoosiers have certainty in their jobs and in their futures going into this Christmas season because of the leadership of Donald Trump.
700 don't.
And I couldn't be more grateful for that. And the people of Indiana couldn't be more grateful for that. Well, look, I know the glass is half empty tendency of many in the media.
Well,
but
it's not about the media, sir.
What you saw happen here.
The media, hitting the media is always a crutch for you guys. It is not about the media.
It's not
there
a
is
crutch.
seven. There's,
yeah,
what do you
Chuck,
say to that?
Chuck, here's the bottom line. I was in the room when he made the call. What the American people are going to have, and they have now in President-elect Donald Trump, is someone who's going to be a champion for the American economy. He picked up the phone and he said to the leadership of this company, look, we're going to cut taxes. We're going to roll back the regulations that are driving companies just like yours out of the country. We're going to renegotiate trade deals so that they put American jobs and American workers first. And he just asked them very respectfully to reconsider their decision to leave. And as governor of Indiana and as a fellow American, I couldn't be more proud and couldn't be more grateful that now more than 1,000 Americans have certainty in their economic future, more than 1,000 jobs, even before he becomes president of the United States. But I think it's just the beginning.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Be ready. Donald Trump's going to be fighting for American jobs and be a champion for the American economy.
Mr. Vice President-elect, that's all the time we have. Would love to have more time with you. I'm guessing that'll come in the future. Thanks for coming in.
So, I don't know. I thought Chuck Todd did a pretty good job there cross-examining Mike Pence on this whole deal with Carrier to keep the jobs in Indiana and the big tax break they got and crony capitalism and not using the media as a crutch. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. So that's the penultimate topic for tonight. I have one more topic with two clips I want to show you. So I guess when I was setting up for the program tonight, I took a picture of Sandy looking at me setting up here. You can see Sandy, and you know, when I look at Sandy and she's giving me that look, I get the feeling that maybe she is not completely accepting of the idea that Donald Trump is going to be president, even though it's been, you know, like a month now and we should all be accepting it. But one reason that I think Sandy is a little bit incredulous is because there's still this recount effort. And I talked about that a little bit last week and how there was like one possible very low probability storyline that could show that voters who cast provisional ballots might not have had their votes counted, or there were certain machines that were miscalibrated. So there's like a lot of votes that, you know, since they're like fill in the bubble type ballots, that if they're miscalibrated, then one machine can miss like thousands and thousands of votes, and there are certain places where there are all these people who didn't vote for president who voted for everybody else, although I don't know if that's all that dispositive. And so that actually came up in this interview on Fox News Sunday with Jill Stein. She was over on Fox News Sunday talking to Chris Wallace, but he was at his most confrontational in this interview. First I'm going to show a shorter clip and then a longer clip from that interview where he kept like asking this fact that he obviously knew the answer, but he really wanted to get her to say the answer. And he said it himself in this first clip of asking, do you know the largest number of votes that were ever turned around in a recount, and trying to get her to admit that there was no chance of the recount changing the outcome. And I will discuss that a little more with you after we watch that 2-minute, 11-second clip together over here.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Stein. Do you know the largest switch of votes in a recount in American political history?
Well, I can tell you one, for example, in Toledo in 2004, there were 90,000 votes that were marked blank, which were discovered actually not to be blank at all, and those when a hand recount was done. And that would have been enough to have changed the outcome in Ohio. Unfortunately, that wasn't found until after the election was already
let me tell
called.
you, the biggest actual switch of votes in any election in U.S. history was back in 2000, when roughly 1,200 votes were switched from Bush to Gore. We're talking about 3 states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, that Donald Trump won by more than 10,000 votes. There's not a chance in the world here, Dr. Stein, that the vote change is that the vote is going to change in those 3 states.
Chris, actually in Michigan, there are 75,000 votes which are blank, which are sky high compared to all other past elections. They are concentrated in Detroit. That's 75,000 votes, which may very well be machine error or human error. That is about 7 times the margin of difference in Michigan. So these results could in fact change the outcome, but we don't know that until we actually examine the evidence, and that means a hand recount of the ballots. That is going forward.
It's never happened. There's never been a
Wisconsin.
70,000 vote switch. The most there's ever been is 1,247. Let me ask you.
That's actually not true. If the recounts were done in time, they could affect 90,000, and in fact, in Detroit, there could very well be 75,000.
I'm talking, Dr. Stein, about recounts that actually happened, not ones that could have happened.
That's because we don't. That's because we don't do them, and in fact, we should do them. That's how we ensure that we have a system we can trust. And right now, as you know, Chris, cynicism and distrust is running wild. We need to address the fundamental concerns that the American voters are expressing.
Dr. Stein, let's talk about what a lot of people.
I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny, where Chris Wallace keeps asking this question where he knows the answer. He's all like prepared. Why ask like a factual question where you know the answer? It seems almost like you're trying to show someone up when, you know, why you're trying to show Jill Stein up as to whether she knows the history of overturned elections based on recounts, or the number of votes that have been switched in recounts. Although I think what Jill Stein said about how our election system hasn't really been tested by a lot of recounts is also true. Here's Sandy coming over to watch the show again for the moment. Here's, like I said, Sandy still doesn't seem to be really convinced about the lack of the recount. I don't know if you can hear her in the background there, probably not. But before I finish the show, I want to show one more clip of Jill Stein, and this is where Chris Wallace is at his most confrontational. He starts off confronting her on how much money she's raising based on the recount, which is put in a segregated account at least, but I guess she's still getting a donor list out of it. And then he asks another one of those questions again, where I don't know if he knows the answer or not, but by the end of this clip, he's repeatedly asking her, well, I mean, how many votes did you get compared to the 62 million votes that Donald Trump got? How many votes did you get? How many votes did you get? And she never really answers, and at least in this case, he doesn't give the answer, but again, I find it kind of amusing. You can let me know what you think after we watch that final clip for the broadcast tonight. Over here.
Dr. Stein, let's talk about what a lot of people think is the real point here, and that is, let's take a look at how much money you raised in your presidential runs. In 2012, you raised $893,000 in your presidential campaign. In 2016, $3.5 million. But for this recount, you've raised more than $6.5 million from almost 140,000 donors. Isn't that what this is really about, Dr. Stein, using this recount to raise lots of money and build your list of supporters?
Let's be very clear. This money is going strictly into a segregated account, which can only be spent on the recount. So this money is will be completely used, and we'll be lucky if we can cover the costs at the rate that there is a bait and switch going on here. In Wisconsin, we just saw the costs triple. So to my mind, it really underscores why we need a fundamentally secure voting system that has built-in safeguards safeguards, that should have automatic audits, recounts. We need to get rid of these voting machines, these electronic touch screens, which have been proven highly vulnerable to tampering, to hacking, to human and machine errors.
So the fact that you have 140,000 donors is purely coincidental, Dr. Stein?
Well, put it this way. The American people have made it very clear what they want done here. Chris, coming out of this election,
wait. I don't think the American people... Wait, where do you get off saying the American people... Where do you get off saying that the American people are calling for this? I think the vast majority of the American people think we should accept the result of the election.
80% of Americans said that they were disgusted with this election. And we know that about 90% of Americans do not have faith.
It may have been the choice they had. I don't think it was the system or a demand for a recount.
This is a time that people have an entire loss of faith in our political institutions. The way that the money is coming in from small donors makes it very clear. And in fact, a poll just last week showed the American people support the recount and that they feel that if Donald Trump was in the reverse position, he would be doing exactly the same thing. Remember, he said that it was a rigged system and that he was not going to accept the result. So he has articulated what many Americans feel. It's time to respect the views of the American voter and ensure that we have a voting system.
Well, some would say that the views of the American voter were that Donald Trump was elected president. You've now decided
to... Well, remember what the voters said by the Electoral College, not by the National Popular Vote.
If I may ask my question, Dr. Stein, you've now decided to go to the federal court to try to get a recount in Pennsylvania after the state court said that you would have to post, or your supporters would have to post, $1 million bond, and you said they can't afford that. You're going to hold a news conference tomorrow in front of Trump Tower. What's he got to do with it?
We want to hold this conference where America will see that we are standing up for everyday Americans who do not have confidence in this election system, who have lost confidence actually in our political system. And we are standing up loud and strong to say that we will not be intimidated. We will not be frightened by having to jump through all these legal hoops. We say, what is Donald Trump frightened of? Because he is obstructing, he is delaying these cases.
How many votes did you get? Dr. Stein, how many votes did you get in this election?
Excuse me, how many votes did Donald Trump get? He got about 2.5 million less votes.
He got 62.5 million votes.
Less votes than Hillary Clinton. So I think the American people are
How many votes did you get, Dr. Stein?
Explanation here of what is going on.
Dr. Stein, could you answer the question?
Know until you look at the evidence.
How many votes did you get?
I am not going to be the beneficiary of this one way or the other. That's why I can do this, because I am a nonpartisan.
But he got 62.5 million votes. How many did you get? I mean, the question really is who's speaking for American voters, him or you?
This is not about Donald Trump. It's not about Hillary Clinton. It's not about my campaign. It's not about Gary Johnson. This is about the American voters who deserve to have a voting system we can trust. When something like 75,000 votes in Detroit may in fact be an error, because why would people come out in Detroit, fill in all the other positions but not vote for president?
Dr. Stein,
this is a little bit suspicious. We deserve to know what's going on, because that could in fact change the outcome of the vote in Michigan.
The third presidential debate, Dr. Stein, I asked...
So there was Chris Wallace at his most confrontational with the how many votes did you get? How many votes did you get? Kind of like the previous one where he already knew the answer to the question where like what's the largest number of votes that was, oh, did you hear like Sandy there shaking? But what's the largest number of votes that any candidate has ever gotten overturned in a recount? I don't know. Why is Chris Wallace at his most confrontational talking to Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate? Is that like the Fox News version of speaking truth to power? It's like speaking truth to the powerless, or I don't know. I mean, I think Chris Wallace kind of showed that Jill Stein is somewhat of a flawed messenger there, and that her chance of overturning the election is very, very unlikely. But as I talked about in my Sunday live clip roundup last week, that unlikely but real scenario based on the Chris Kobach inspired Republican plan to shut out all these Democratic voters. Was it Project Check? I can't even remember what it's called anymore, but is it Check Block? I can't even remember, but Crosscheck, Project Crosscheck, that's what it was. I don't know why my stupid brain, but I've done so many things since last week, including having to deal with this Sacramento City Council meeting. So anyway, I think there is some possibility that, very small, that there'll be some change in the outcome of the election based on the recount, but it's not something I'm counting on. And when I showed those Jill Stein clips to Sandy, she also, you can see, is giving a little bit of skeptical side eye there, so you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. That's the last clip I want to show you tonight, and I will be back next Sunday, even more delayed than this week, because next Sunday I have to go to Oakland. My Sacramento chapter of the ACLU is getting the Chapter of the Year award. Well, we actually tied with another chapter, but I will be going. I don't know if I'll get any video out of that event in Oakland, but it's in the afternoon, and just the driving is like 3 to 4 hours, and then I'll be there for a couple hours, so I don't know. I may even have to delay the show over to the next day, you know, like Monday morning. So look for a delayed Sunday clip roundup next Sunday, and I think this could actually be the week. I've said this before, but that I will actually get the edited, produced draft version of my video is Economics Anti-Feminist, based on Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner, this book I've had up over my right shoulder here. And if you want to help support my videos, over my left shoulder here, there's a little eye you can click on to give me direct fan funding, or you can become one of my patrons on Patreon. There's a link down in the video description for that. If you appreciate all of these clips I picked out for you, the editing I do, the commentary, all the rest of it, and if you want to help me keep doing my Sunday clip roundup through the Trump administration, trying to show where there's media bias, and also showing some of the outlandish stuff that Donald Trump himself is doing. And if you like all that, you can help support my videos either through fan funding, Patreon funding, or just by putting your comments down in the video description, or putting your comments down in the comment section, or giving me a thumbs up, or sharing this on social media. I think actually YouTube is rewarding videos that get more engagement, so the more of those things that you do, like thumbs up and commenting, I think that actually does help my video get more views. So anyway, you can help out, I appreciate, and if you appreciate what I'm doing. And I guess until next week, I will see you all around the internet.